The discussion around genetically modified crops leans towards an obvious privileging of their utility. For example, GMOs promise to decrease chemical inputs, as well as to eliminate the need for damaging tilling practices, thus increasing yield while helping the environment. They also promise to address issues of hunger and malnutrition by increasing agricultural production and responding to micronutrient deficiencies. However, this type of discussion often leaves out less scientific questions that may be equally important, such as those with sociocultural and philosophical dimensions. At the most basic level, whose nature, and thus whose knowledge, matters in this conversation? There are entire scholarly fields focused on this and related questions, including people who study the production of scientific knowledge, the relationships between colonizers and the colonized, and even the specific roles of women's voices in the construction of knowledge, voices that have historically been erased. We're incapable of appropriately representing the scope of these fields in this course, but we nonetheless want to acknowledge them and present the related arguments. I'll do this by first introducing Vandana Shiva, an Indian environmentalist, activist, and scholar who is a controversial yet highly influential figure in this space. Her message, according to the New Yorker's Michael Spector, is that by engineering, patenting, and transforming seeds into costly packets of intellectual property, multinational corporations, governments, and philanthropic organizations are attempting to impose food totalitarianism on the world. This is a big claim. Food totalitarianism. What are we to make of this? You only need to look at the simple yet thought-provoking cover artwork on her book, Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, to get an idea of how relevant and important this argument is to questions of biological technology development and its ownership. One version has a bar-coded butterfly, while the other has a tree with roots in the form of a barcode, symbolizing the threats corporatization of science has to the tree of knowledge. Modern breeding and plant biotechnology is just the latest development following thousands of years of seed improvement, and has become an applied evolutionary science that has modified the course of natural history. We can outdo evolution, Nobel laureate David Baltimore famously suggested. But is outdoing evolution natural? In response to scientific attempts to define GMOs as natural, Shiva argues that on one hand, property rights on life forms are claimed for products on the basis of their being new, or novel, or not occurring in nature. She says this becomes contradictory when it comes time for the property holder, presumably multinational biotech corporations, to take responsibility for the socioeconomic and biosafety consequences of GMOs. Suddenly, these life forms are not new, they're natural, and they are regarded as safe. Shiva writes, thus, when biological organisms have to be owned, they are treated as not natural. When the ecological impact of releasing GMOs is called to account by environmentalists, these same organisms are now natural. These shifting constructions of natural show that science, which claims the highest levels of objectivity, is actually very subjective and opportunistic in its approach to nature. Shiva argues that intellectual property rights drive widening economic inequality by excluding knowledge, ideas, and innovations that take place in the intellectual commons by non-scientists, non-industrial experts. Feminists observe that this includes women and those living within indigenous knowledge systems, and vocal proponents of systems of food sovereignty. Rural sociologists may argue that intellectual property rights only exist to recognize knowledge and innovation that generates profit, not that directly addressing social need. Genetic engineering and patents on life forms are arguably expressions of the commodification of nature. Critics such as Shiva contend that living organisms are simultaneously being constructed as natural while being seen as man-made phenomena. For Shiva, this is in essence the colonization of life. Do you agree?